Yeah, so I mean, we look at, obviously there's going to be a bigger picture for our research, right, to help other teams establish, other departments to establish joint peer support teams to do research in it and things like that. But at a purely operational level, we get close to real-time data from our peer support team members as to what trends they're seeing when they're helping other officers or professional staff members out, and then what they feel in terms of comfortability with those topics that are being presented to them, so we can develop training in response to that to make sure they are better prepared for what might confront them, and then also exploring resource referral needs. So if we're seeing an uptick, particularly one example that highlighted in our research early on was an uptick in officers putting in there that they're helping people deal with grief and process through grief. That was something we hadn't really addressed much in our initial training or even in-service training, so we partnered with a local hospice facility, and they were able to send in a doctor who's certified in grief counseling, and she taught our team how to be better professionals when it comes to peer support for grief. So there's been a few examples of that where the research has shown us things. If you're not asking the question, you're not getting the answer, right? So there's a lot of things that kind of we were thinking, all right, this must be trauma related, this must be officer-involved shootings, kind of thinking narrowly in terms of critical incidents. But a lot of what we've seen is actually not necessarily police related. It's things that are going on at home, things that's going on with taking care of a sick family member, other ways we can support our officers where it's not necessarily just locked into the facility of the department or within the walls of the agency. Yeah, so I mean, we have a great team. I'm a huge believer in multidisciplinary team, so there's all kinds of people who are at the table for this project. We have our board certified police and public safety psychologist, Dr. Jen Kelly. She's our clinician, so we have a clinician on our peer support team. We have two different peer support teams that are in operation right now. The one we're working on the project with is our original team, so that's made up of 3 police departments. We're a joint team. So we have leadership liaisons for each of those agencies. We have our police psychologists, and we have the partnership with Janice Awama and American University, and Melissa Kilmer, who also works with Janice, has been very helpful in the project. And how we develop that is myself as the program founder and Dr. Kelly as a program clinician. You know, we have quarterly in-service trainings, and at the beginning of those trainings, we talk with the team about what they've been through, about what they've helped people with, about where they feel like there's weak points or gaps, and we try to facilitate some kind of meaningful change for them or training. So a lot of the things we hear from the peers directly during those quarterly meetings, we then push that to American University, and often American comes to our quarterly trainings and actually attends them for us, and gives us updates on the data they're collecting, things they're seeing, clarifies questions, asks if questions are ambiguous or if people are confused about what they're actually seeking information-wise. We're able to tailor the data collection to meet the needs of the people who are actually inputting it to make sure we're getting the correct data. As you know, data collection, there's oftentimes what we want to measure and what the person who's taking the survey thinks we want to measure, and there's kind of a disconnect there. So we're trying to get that in as close to real time as possible by having that open dialogue, that open communication with the researchers. Dr. Awama and Melissa Kilmer are regularly at our meetings. They've done ride-alongs with our departments and things like that. So we're truly firm believers in the fact that if you're going to be an academic or a clinician on the team, you have to be embedded in policing and understand the culture, which all the people at that table have been doing great with. And a lot of what we're doing with the peer support team, particularly the multi-agency approach to this, is also founded out of research we did very early on in our wellness programming that showed officers did want a peer support team, but they wanted to have options outside of their own agency. So pretty much everything we've been doing has been very purposeful in looking at officer responses, letting them truly drive the bus on this, whereas oftentimes we found in my own personal experience in law enforcement, when we took surveys, somebody took that data and then put it in a desk drawer, and that was the end of it. So we want to make sure that the people see that when you take these surveys and you put the data in after you have a peer contact, we're taking it seriously, we're operationalizing it, we're making meaningful change based on what you're giving us. If you're taking the time to do this, we want to show you that we're valuing what you're telling us, and we're actually going to operationalize it or seek clarification on what it is you're trying to tell us.
Yeah, no, that's great. Taking a step back a little bit and thinking about some of the implications from your paper, you know, how do some of the lessons that you've learned apply to implementing things in the field, right? And what lessons have you drawn from this specific research and paper that might be applicable to the policing more broadly?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things that we've realized, and it keeps getting reinforced, is generally speaking, our officers are okay to compartmentalize a lot of the things that they see on the street. Again, generally speaking, and does that lead to adverse health outcomes? Absolutely it does. But the point is what they're actually coming forward with and asking for help with, or what's really disrupting their everyday life, is that kind of balance between work and family life, or something going on in their personal life. Because in policing, a lot of what we've seen from research, it's things that are beyond the officer's control or beyond the professional staff member's sense of control. So, the example I always give is I can go to as a police officer, I'm pretty confident I can go to almost anything that's chaotic and generally stabilize it in 15 minutes. And if I have a few friends with me, quicker than that, usually. When we go home or we get bad news from a doctor or our parent calls us and says they've just been diagnosed with such and such, or we have a special needs child who's not getting the services that they need at their school and things like that, when you start throwing those things into the mix with the stress of being a police officer and that dynamic, that's generally where we see officers, their coping mechanisms, their skill sets, their resiliency, it's beyond the capabilities of that. So we often talk about how important it is to be resilient in law enforcement, and it is. We have to teach people how to prepare for knowing that they're going to see trauma, knowing they're going to see stressful situations, knowing they're going to see human suffering, but oftentimes we kind of miss the mark in terms of what's also going on in their personal lives, and also, how do we find that out as an organization? If we're not doing tracking with our peers who are actually logging in, everything's anonymized, but they're logging in. Yeah, I met with an officer today who is struggling because they're moving their parent in who has dementia because they don't want them to go to assisted living facility, right? So our officers are putting that information in. Now we're saying, all right, well, these are things we should be able to help our people with, and this is why Officer so-and-so is taking so much leave. But if we're not asking those questions, we're never going to know that. Some officers are very private, or the people who are well-meaning, like our peers, maybe they want to respect the privacy of the other officer and things like that, and they don't ask, and now this officer's thinking, like, I'm abandoned, nobody cares about what I have going on, nobody's even asking me while I'm not at work. Right, so we really try to put that in front of our people regularly. Be proactive. If there's an officer or a professional staff member who's been out more than normal, if they're just different, something's off, like, be confident and able to have that conversation. And oftentimes the person's going to be, wow, somebody actually noticed, somebody actually cares. Then try and put those services in front of them. Hey, can we get you a meal train? Hey, can we get you some DoorDash gift cards? Let's do a GoFundMe for it, or whatever it is, to try and support that officer and their family through the adversity, rather than just saying, our cops went through a really bad call, let's do a critical incident stress debriefing, and that's the end of it until the next critical incident.
Sure.